Welcome to Making Space For, the podcast where we embark on a journey to simplify, organize, and prioritize our lives. I'm your host, Paige Rabin, and each episode will explore the art of intentional living, helping you make room for what truly matters. In a world filled with constant noise and distractions, it's easy to find ourselves surrounded by things that don't contribute to our happiness or well-being. Making Space For is your guide to decluttering not just your physical space, but also your mind and soul. We'll dive into practical tips on downsizing, right-sizing, and the transformative power of letting go. Whether you're starting a cluttered closet, pondering legacy planning, or seeking the elusive balance between work and self-care, this podcast is your sanctuary for inspiration and actionable insights. Join us as we feature experts, share personal stories, and explore the profound impact of intentional living. Together, we'll navigate the journey towards a simpler, more fulfilling life. One where you have more of what matters and less of what doesn't. So are you ready to make space for the life you've always wanted? Let's dive in. This is Making Space For. Well, before we dive into today's episode, a quick shout out to our flagship company, A Move Handled with Care. As Denver Metro's premier senior and specialty move management expert since 2007, we've mastered the art of downsizing, right-sizing, organizing, and every step in between. From packing and moving to unpacking and staging, our experienced staff represent all stages of life, offering a compassionate touch to what matters most to you. So, if you're looking to make a seamless transition while keeping what truly matters in focus, trust A Move Handled with Care. Visit us at amovehandledwithcare.com or on Facebook or LinkedIn to discover the difference. Let's continue making space for the life you deserve. Welcome back to the Making Space For podcast. I'm your host, Paige Rabin, and today we sit down with Kate Hufnagel, founder of the Digital Wrangler, to learn about the concept of a digital legacy. After working in big tech for 25 years, Kate is now a legacy and estate organizer and combines her personal experiences with her technical ones to help individuals leave behind a well-organized legacy. Together, we discuss what a legacy is, what happens when we don't consider the impact of technology on loss, and practical tips for organizing your digital assets. Whether you're a senior, an empty nester, a newlywed, or a single parent, this episode offers insights to inspire you to plan for your digital legacy. This is Making Space For Your Digital Legacy. But Kate, so good for us to reconnect. I know I saw you at several different events and was just super impressed with and also, to be honest with you, very terrified with all of the information that you had to share. It's so very valuable and things that people hadn't considered and just super important. And so I just wanted you to I know in this amount of time we can't cover probably, but just the tip of the iceberg of all the different things that you have to bring. But I just want to kind of jump in and I guess tell us, a little bit about who you are. How did you go from, the life I know that you lived prior to, kind of what you're doing now and that journey a little bit?
Well, for your audience who may not know me, my name is Kate Hufnagel, and I spent 25 years working in big tech, developing solutions for the intelligence community, our military community. And while working in that space, a few things happened to me. One, especially in the Intel community, we are trained that we can't or we shouldn't keep things in our head. So if it's near the end of the business day and I have a conversation with a colleague or someone else in the organization that maybe is a customer of something that we were building, we were really encouraged to kind of document the takeaways. So whether that meant, sending a Slack message to somebody or updating a Google Doc or sending an email, we were really kind of ingrained from day one, like we
Sure.
shouldn't keep anything in our heads. Well, in my late 30s, I had a medical emergency actually at the office, and got my first ambulance ride. Turns out was allergic to foods that can potentially kill me, and I
Mm,
learned the hard way that I was allergic to them. But in that moment, even though I had created my first will in my late 20s, it started to dawn on me, even while I was sitting at the ER, um, like my family doesn't live in Northern Virginia. They don't know who my utility providers are for the house. Email and
mhm.
other digital things were just starting to take effect. This was now probably 15 years ago. And it just got me thinking about all of the things that my loved ones would need to know. So I started kind of putting my own little life playbook together. And then about 5 years ago, I had another medical emergency that my now husband took me to the ER in the middle of the night. And I kind of was reflecting and having that same thought. And I was like, oh my gosh, thanks to the pandemic, we're utilizing tech so much more than ever before. And I was
Mm-hmm.
like, my life playbook is almost entirely digital now in
Yeah.
terms of all of my online accounts, like auto delivery of things that show up on our doorstep, the streaming services. And I was like, wow, this is kind of nuts. And it was around that time where some of my colleagues were either losing a loved one, and then just by water cooler talk I was providing tips, and oftentimes they're like, how did you know all this stuff? And I'm like, I don't know, I guess I'm kind of just like passionate, and I kind of dork out on it a little bit. So I left the corporate world about 3.5 years ago and took a little time to figure out what I wanted to be when I grew up. Now that I'm 50, I guess I'm like, I can think about that. And so I created my business just about 3 years ago now to educate people on this concept of a digital legacy. And ultimately, if they choose, if they feel they need support, help them in organizing their important life details.
Yeah, there was so much in your, we talk a lot with our clients about what we, nomenclature is a triggering event. A lot of people don't need to do the thing, whatever the thing is, until there is a triggering event. And so your whole business is getting ahead of that triggering event and planning and organizing because it will someday, sometime that will happen. There will be, you're maybe you can't physically or mentally handle your affairs. That was one of the things that kind of struck me what you said, when I saw you speak the first time, is like people think that it has to be a catastrophic event. Well, what if it's an injury? What if it's something that it's not necessarily you're not gone. It's just your role has to change and shift. And so what does that look like? And so I love the word, digital legacy, because I don't think people think about the footprint of themselves digitally the way that you think that way. It's so deep and ingrained. Like, oh, they're like, oh, well, I have, an online bank account and I have an old Yahoo email. And you went into, multiple things. So I guess speak to a digital legacy. What's a traditional, or what is the idea of a digital legacy?
So, a digital legacy, in essence, is any online account that you have, whether it's email, cloud storage, any photos, text messages that are saved on your phone, your customer loyalty rewards that are all in the digital space, your Amazon account, your Netflix account. And if and your medical portals that you use to talk with
Mm-hmm.
doctors, right? And I always mention those because our healthcare systems, believe it or not, are the number one targeted by hackers, right? Last year there was some big news with some healthcare systems getting hacked, and that resulted in patients not being able to get their prescriptions through the mail for a period of time.
Mm-hmm.
So we have all of these online accounts. And unlike physical property, right, every state basically has a hierarchy. So even if someone were to pass away, let's say without a will, when it comes to physical property like a house or a car, each state kind of has a rule book of, okay, she didn't leave a will. Does she have a husband or a spouse? Okay, she does. And if not, does she have any children? So each state kind of dictates what happens to physical property. Well, in the digital space, even if you have a spouse, the spouse has no rights
Mm-hmm.
to that account. And we discover that when we read those lengthy terms of service agreements, when we create our online account, that, probably 99.2% don't even read that. They
No, we
just
just scroll. We scroll and we
we, we
sign.
s- we scroll and we check the box. It says, yes, I did actually read those and I'm
Yes.
consenting. Um, and so I think that creates a lot of challenges because in our high-tech world, right, these phones that we carry around with that have all of these apps that allow us to talk to our doctors or send a text message to a loved one, technology makes our lives easier,
Hmm.
at least in theory,
In
depending on the
theory, yes.
generation that you live in, right? But when we are not around, or when I spoke to a group of business owners in Woodland Park not too long ago, and a woman around the table said, "You know what? I was thrown from a horse." I think she said it was like 6 years ago when she suffered a traumatic brain injury. She couldn't remember the password to her cell phone.
Mm,
Right? Now, today, she's, certainly doing, well, living a vibrant life. But because of that triggering event for her, she's like, my whole entire family knows how to get into my devices. They know about all of the passwords to my accounts. And so I think, Paige, what you're saying, like, there is a triggering event, whether it's something that happens to us personally
hmm.
or something happens to our best friend, and we watch them kind of figure this out. Um, and really, why we need to care. Well, to me, there's various reasons why we need to care about our digital legacy. But first and foremost, our loved ones should be left instructions on what to do with all of our digital accounts, right? We don't want to keep those accounts basically open and abandoned because they could get hacked.
Right.
And that hacking could result in either financial hardship or even emotional hardship that we don't tend to think about. And so we don't want to leave that behind for our loved ones. There could be other accounts, let's say if you're a frequent flyer or you have a hotel chain that you love to use when you travel, you might be accumulating points, loyalty points with that company. Well, those points are worth money.
Money.
And in some cases, because I there are some digital hoarders out there who just love to collect. Oh yeah, I now have
Digital hoarders. I
150,000.
hadn't considered that level of
Right.
hoarding.
That, yeah, no, it
Yeah.
exists. It's like, oh, I have 1,000,000 miles,
Yeah.
right? Well, if you translate that to a dollar amount, you could be talking some significant
Yeah.
amount of money. And my husband and I took a pretty large trip last year. Going into the trip, we had close to 40 hotel night stays accumulated.
Wow.
So that adds up. And so
Sure.
you want your loved ones to know that these things exist.
Hmm.
And ideally, you're leaving some guidance of like, okay, here's what to do about all of these accounts.
Okay, so the 9 times out of 10, our clientele, like even if I'm working with, people in the senior world, even young professionals, myself included, it's a little bit of a joke after my business partner and I, when we saw you speak at 2 different times. So she went to a session and then I switched and I came out of your session and she's like, you look like you've been like, deer in headlights. I'm like, oh, you just wait. I was like, you just wait, you go in there. And I was like, we're going to come out. We're going to have some things to say. So it's a joke that, I mean, how many of us have, the notepad at home or the spreadsheet or the old school way of like writing down, the passwords in this. My mom has a little flip book that I know she has. So somebody who's starting there, that's where the level of organization. Let's just even say
Right?
that's as far as you are.
Mhm.
What are like some of like your where to start points, where to consider points? What are like kind of those
Right.
basic things that you tell people to kind of start and look at?
Okay, so if sounds like your mom is very similar to my parents. My parents are in their 80s and they have this address book that they've converted to their password book. If that is where you are, and if that works for you, right? I don't want you to change something that's not broken. Please make sure that your handwriting is legible.
Yeah.
And please make sure that you let your loved ones know where they can find that book or that notepad.
Hmm.
Okay. Some of my clients, like I just started working with a senior aged woman in town. She has, she can't even read her own writing for the
Mm.
passwords.
Hmm.
So we're now working on that together. If there's people listening, Paige, who have, say, a spreadsheet. Well, please make sure that that spreadsheet is updated,
Updated. That's
right?
the hardest part, right? They trigger you to make a new password. It's now updated in that spreadsheet. So it's not the old one.
Right. And so that maintenance of keeping that
Hmm.
information updated for anyone who, say, is more comfortable using technology, after chatting with them, I may suggest that they consider using a standalone password manager. There's a number of tools out there that not only will securely protect your password, but let's say you wanted to share the Netflix password with a spouse or your kids, they'll allow you to do that securely. And if you were to change the password, they can give you tools so that you can create like a really long password that's like 18, 20 characters long, because that's kind of what the experts are now recommending. And so then, therefore, with a password manager, it does all the work for you. And ultimately, you only need to remember the one single password to log into your password manager.
Okay. Yeah.
Right. So, depending on the phase of life and how comfortable people are with tech, I think there's three different solutions available to people today.
Okay. Well, and you talked a little bit about other things too. So, and I think like to your point of like letting people know where that is, where that information is, and it may be to multiple people. So maybe it's your spouse and your adult daughter. Maybe it's your spouse and your best friend, or in my case, it's my business partner because her and I share this, business marriage, if you will. So
Mhm.
she has, privy to certain things and stuff like that. So I will say we jumped into action because I was like, there's things that she manages in her business that I don't, and vice versa. So making sure that you are communicating with your partner, whatever that partner may be in business and life, where that stuff is. And you talked a little bit about being the COO of your home. And I think that people don't necessarily think about that, of that it takes a lot of, I mean, especially nowadays, it takes some digital wherewithal to be able to manage your home. And so
Yeah.
to look at that as the job that it is and to
Mhm.
to communicate what that is, like you were saying, like, the Dollar Shave Club or something like that. I mean, that may be just delivered for till the end of time if somebody doesn't know how to access that account and turn it off and things like that. So I guess speak a little bit about how not only just in maybe business, but even in your personal life, like that COO like kind of
Right.
mindset of managing your home.
Yeah. So I refer to it as the chief of household operations.
Okay.
Right. And I'm going to use my husband and I, right? We're both in our 50s. He handles a lot of we'll call it the dirty jobs around the house. So he has set up on auto pay the landscaper who comes to aerate the lawn. And so once a year, I'm like, okay, has that changed? Is it still this company? Because I know he communicates with them either via email or text message, so he's got, yeah, sure, he's got the contact information in his phone, but he has like 1,000 contacts in his
Yeah.
phone,
So unless you know
right?
his that person's name, you don't know where to find it. Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. So when it comes to head of household operations, we could be talking about having auto pay set up for the mortgage, maybe auto pay for the utility bills, or like you were talking about, like Dollar Shave Club, or if you get, deliveries from Amazon or Walmart, like
Hmm.
on a frequent basis, right? Set it and forget it. We love that because it takes that mental load off of us.
Hmm.
But if we are in an accident and we're not able to communicate, or worse, I kind of joke with my husband frequently because, I get hormones delivered in 90 days supply from my doctor. So I'm like, babe, what are you going to do with a 3 month supply of hormones that show up on the doorstep? I'm like, you're not going to use them. And his eyes just start to glaze over. And we laugh about it, but it's a very real
Sure.
situation, right? Because if something does unexpected happen to me, right, my husband is going to need space to and time to grieve my loss. He when he has the capacity, he's going to need to take over whatever household operation tasks I've been responsible for. And then, oh, by the way, he has a full-time job. And oh, by the way, he has aging parents himself.
Mm-hmm.
And so what time and capacity is left then to figure out all of my digital
Sure.
accounts in essence,
Sure.
right? So that's kind of where I approach not only my family but with clients. It's just
Yeah.
like, okay, let's walk through some scenarios. What do you want to do to make things easier for your loved ones? You just want to leave them a list of all of your digital accounts? Well, that's certainly better than nothing,
Yeah. It's a
right?
starting point. And you talked a little bit too about, things that maybe you hadn't considered. Like when you talked about your phone, I mean, we all live and breathe by our phones these days.
Right.
And there are some great protection programs in place by the Apples and the
Mm,
whatever Verizons and whoever owns the I guess the IP of your phone. But you told some stories that were, kind of concerning about not being able to access photos and things like that.
mm,
So I guess there's
yes.
that piece. And then I guess
Mhm,
following on with how these phones work and that next level is social media. Social media is its own little thing too, that if you don't have, access to those things, like kind of um what are those ramifications if not communicated
mhm.
appropriately, what can happen there?
Yeah, so I'm so glad that you're bringing up the photos, right? Because typically, we carry these phones around in our pockets and we take photos everywhere we go. We're not paying for them, but we've taken a photo for a reason. We've
Hmm.
captured that memory for a reason. And so I have heard several stories of clients who, again, it was something that happened to either their loved one or they couldn't get access to one of their loved one's photos. But if you are, let's say, an iPhone user and you have your phone set up where your photos are being saved to your Apple ID account, which is your cloud account, well, guess what? Unless you've left instructions behind for your loved ones so that they can access your phone and access your Apple ID account, Apple is not going to give them access to those photos. Again, that's something that we agree to when we create our account, but we're not reading that
Hmm.
all of that like 317-page document. And of course I'm exaggerating. So from an Apple perspective, they do have a tool called a legacy contact, and you can go into your Apple ID account and designate one or multiple people. And by doing that, you're saying to Apple, hey, Apple, if any of these people reach out to you to let you know that I have passed away or I have become incapacitated in some sort, Apple, I am authorizing you to give access to my data, which could include your videos and photos. It could include your text messages. It could include your contacts. It could include your Apple email. Again, it depends on how you are utilizing your Apple account. But that is what Apple will look to first.
Hmm.
So if something were to happen to me and my husband reaches out to Apple, Apple's going to look at my account and say, okay, did Kate designate a legacy contact? And Apple's going to be like, oh, look at this. She's got 5 legacy contacts for her Apple account. So we're going to follow these instructions that Kate gave us ahead of time.
Yeah.
And if I haven't designated a legacy contact, then the law actually states that, okay, we're going to look at Kate's legal documents in her estate plan. Does she have a line in here about what she wants to have happen to her Apple account? And so many attorneys are not really doing this. So
Yeah.
we're going to assume that my will doesn't include any instructions. And then if that's the case, then Apple's terms of service, and there's court precedents because the judges are ruling in favor then of the terms of service, which says we're not going to give access even if it's a spouse. Kate, when you created your account, we committed to you. This is Apple now speaking. Apple committed to me that they weren't going to give anyone access to my data,
Right.
and that unfortunately prevails even after I pass away.
which in most cases is a great protection for people until it's not. And so I love that there's an easy way to do that. And I
Mhm.
think unless you know, you don't know. And you're
Correct.
right. Like most of the conversation that people are having is over the physical things, but there are not physical things like photos and
Mhm.
things that you're doing on your phone. I mean, I run my day on my phone. So, I
Yep.
mean, my business runs through my phone, my schedule runs through my phone, my kids' schedule runs through my phone. So, I
Mhm.
mean, there's just so many different things that if you don't have access to, but yeah, and it's similar in social media, correct? Like, and some are different than others. Again, I feel like you have that special knowledge of, and I don't think people take the time. Most of us don't think we need to take the time to understand that, but social media is a little kind of similar to like how Apple views your phone, correct?
Yes. Yeah. So Facebook is one of the largest social media platforms out there. They also have an online tool. And in this case, it's called the same thing as Apple. They call it a legacy contact. And you can go into your Facebook settings and you can tell Facebook, hey, this is the person. Now Facebook limits it to only one person. So you can only tell Facebook, hey, I want this person to be in charge of my Facebook account when I am no longer around or able to manage it. And why I encourage people to do this, and Paige, I don't know if you heard this woman from the South Denver Chamber tell this story, but I use her story frequently. So her husband passed away, I think it's now 6 years ago, and he had a long illness. So his passing wasn't a surprise,
Mm-hmm.
but they used that time that they had remaining together to focus on all the positive things, right? Okay, let's get our legal documents in order. Let's maybe take a trip. And 6 years ago, our digital footprint or our digital legacy wasn't being talked about like it is today. And it never occurred to her to get the password to his Facebook account. So his Facebook account has been lying dormant all of
Mm-hmm.
these years, right? Facebook isn't going to close it simply because he's not using it, because closing the account makes Facebook's numbers look bad,
Yeah.
right? Well, about a year and a half ago, his Facebook account was hacked, and she discovered it was hacked because the hackers were sending her Facebook messages from her deceased husband's account.
How horrible.
I know, and that emotional trauma. And
Mm-hmm.
that's what she talked about. Like her husband's passing was not a surprise. It was anticipated. But she says years later, completely out of the blue, she's getting these text
Mm.
messages. And they were also sending Facebook messages to her husband's friends too. So all of them
Mm.
collectively just went through this other stage of grief that, in my opinion, really shouldn't have happened.
Mm-hmm. My husband has a cousin who's passed away, and his Facebook account I think is still active. Well, dormant, as you said, but it's still there. And every now and again it'll pop up, like, people you might know. And
Mhm.
that's just painful, like every time you see that. And also, like to your point of protecting your identity once you've passed or can no longer. I mean, that's the other thing too, is protecting your identity. Whatever
Mhm.
that could be. They could, who knows what they could be using that for, to get to manipulate or whatever. And so if you want to close them down, um and things like that, to know that. So, I mean, things are ever evolving in the tech world. So, I guess
Mhm.
what tips and tricks do you tell people um as far as how to keep up to date with what they should know to keep their digital legacy most up to date?
Well, I think first and foremost, it's to me, everything kind of boils down to the passwords. So making sure whatever makes sense for you and your unique situation, letting your loved ones know, okay, this is how I am tracking my passwords, and here's where you can find that information. That to me is really the most critical thing that you could do. Along those lines, if you are an Apple user or a Facebook user or a Google user or a Dropbox user, those four big tech companies have a tool similar, like I'll say similar, it's named similar to a legacy contact, but of course, these four companies can call the tool whatever they want. So Dropbox calls it a trusted contact. Google calls it an inactive account manager. And then, as a reminder, Apple and Facebook call it a legacy contact. Any of those platforms, if you're using, I encourage your community to designate and set up and tell those four companies who they want or who they're authorizing to have access to their account. Doing that ahead of time is going to make things a little bit easier. And then maybe the last thing is just to kind of reflect and ask yourself, okay, like, how many accounts do I really use? Because when you stop and start thinking about it, you start thinking about, okay, what are the apps or accounts that I use to support my home? What about the ones that I rely on just from my medical data? What about the ones that I use for email and social media and
Mm-hmm.
all the streaming services? And it just, you'll be surprised just how long that list becomes. And I think sitting and reflecting and just thinking about that and then realizing, oh my goodness, a loved one's going to have to take care of all of this,
Yeah.
right? And just ask yourself, okay, what can I do to make things easier? And it can actually spark a lot of interesting conversations with loved ones.
I would totally agree that it's the conversations of just like things when you hadn't considered it, like having those conversations. And I know that it opened up some conversation with my husband and I because I do tend to handle more of the day-to-day things. But
Mhm.
then there's some things that he has, like some big financial things that I don't have access to, old 401k accounts from previous employers and things that I would not know about. I'm like, I don't even know what those accounts are. And he manages things and he plays in the stock market here, there, and yonder, whatever that might be. It's having that conversation because sometimes you aren't even aware of the activity that your spouse is even doing or your partner or, your parents whatever it is who you're helping manage. And I love that you said at the beginning of this conversation, like if it's working for you, don't feel like you have to reinvent the wheel.
Right.
That you work with the systems that are. So if it is a notebook, but it's just keeping that notebook up to date. I know my mom still writes in pencil in her notebook because she'll update the information with the pencil. But I think the biggest thing, like you said, is letting people know. But for those who are struggling with this idea, or maybe they don't have the support system in place, maybe they don't have a spouse, or maybe they don't have adult children, um, and they're feeling a little overwhelmed, where would you tell them to start? I know you can speak. I would love you to speak a little bit about kind of what your methodology is, and if there's people like you across the country. Like this was a new thing that I had heard about, but you're
Mhm.
probably not the only. So, what is the Digital Wrangler, and how does that help people set themselves up for success?
So, my business, thank you, Paige, for allowing me to talk about it briefly. My business is the Digital Wrangler, and I focus on helping individuals and families organize their important life details. And then, Paige, I also help people like you, small business owners, organizing their business continuity information so that everyone is prepared for any event that life may throw their way. From a personal perspective, especially when it comes to estate planning, right? Everyone, let's face it, when we lose a family member, people get really funny about money. And our estate plan, on average, the typical American updates their estate plan once a decade. But in this age where we can open and close digital accounts left and right and with just a couple of touches, it's vital to ensure that you have a list of your financial assets and your financial liabilities, including your credit card, because executors, before they can dole out the money, they have to address all of the liabilities that an individual has left behind. So, knowing that our bank accounts change or have the potential to change far more frequently than how we're updating our will, it's really important to kind of list that information as well because you're going to be making things easier for the executor because they're not going to have to do as much financial forensics in
Hmm.
terms of trying to find and locate all of your financial assets.
Yeah.
Um, so that's really important to a lot of people, especially some of, let's say, my clients in their second half of life, because they recognize that they've worked hard to save that money. And if they're going to pass away and still have that money, they want to make sure that their beneficiaries know about all of those accounts. So I think that's something really important to some people. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you know, family recipes that might have been written in like your grandmother's handwriting. You may have them stuffed, I don't know, in between pages of a book. So you may want to think about, do I digitize that recipe?
Yep.
Or just letting people know, okay, it is stored inside the pages of my favorite poetry book. Because if they're going to be going through and sorting all of your stuff, your physical stuff, they may not be looking through all the pages in all the books.
Mm-hmm.
So anything, any breadcrumb or hint, even if you kind of want to make a game of it and call it like a treasure map, give them some clues today while you still have the ability and wherewithal to pass that information on. To me, that's the legacy that you can leave behind.
Perfect. Well, the last question I want to ask you is the title of our podcast is The Making Space for Podcast. And so, what does considering this
Mhm.
digital legacy, creating one, spending the time to think about it and communicate with others, what does that do to help create space in people's lives for the things that truly matter?
Well, speaking from my own experience of my, we'll call them medical emergencies, having all of my things organized, and by things, physical and digital, for me, it has created more space to just live life with intention.
Yeah, I love that.
For some of my clients, like I finished working with a woman shortly before Thanksgiving, and she just said to me at the end of our time together, she's like, Kate, I can sleep better at night now because I don't have to worry that my family isn't going to be able to find, XYZ,
Mm-hmm.
right? So whether you want to sleep better, whether you just want to be more intentional with your life, whether you just want to create more space to have more fun, I think having all of this information organized and prepared for your loved ones truly is the greatest gift that you can leave behind.
Totally agree. I use my mental picture as a computer with lots of tabs open. And it allows me to close some tabs to know that that's been handled. I don't have to keep ruminating over it and worried about it because it's been handled. That you've had those conversations. And I think that's the biggest thing is it opens space to have a conversation that you didn't know you should be having. Um, all of the topics on our podcast have been like that for me. That's why I've invited people like yourself on, is because there's been something that you all have sparked in me, even in this space that I work in, of like, well, I haven't considered that. So or having those intentional conversations. And so as we age, as we grow, as life gets more complicated and we add spouses and children and adult children, all of the things we add, making sure that we communicate that just is the biggest, in my opinion, gift that we can give others, is that they don't have to pick up a piece that's just a mess. That they know what your wishes are, and
Right.
they feel empowered to make those decisions on your behalf.
Yes, and if they know what our wishes are, then they can make those decisions with confidence and
Yeah,
not have any guilt or worry being like, did I make the decision that Kate wanted me to
yeah.
make?
It's no
You
longer a
know?
guessing game. It's a nope. We did exactly what she asked, and then
Yes.
there's a level of yeah, just contentment that you have with that.
Yeah, and relief and comfort
Yeah.
knowing, yeah, Kate
Well, I
trusted me to do
appreciate what
this.
you do. I definitely think that your education to others, just even like I said, just opening up that idea of conversation. It's so cool, your journey of where you started, and kind of this really high tech, all the way down to really just helping people manage, in lack of a better word, the small tech of our world, but the
Yes.
stuff that has the most impact. It's the stuff that has impact on the people that we love. So I appreciate what you do. And I follow you all the time. I listen to what you're doing. And
Oh,
so yeah, we just really appreciate your sharing your little wisdom nuggets with us today.
thank you so much, Paige, for having me. I really have enjoyed connecting with you again.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you so much. That wraps up another inspiring episode of the Making Space for podcast. A huge thank you to our incredible guest and to you, our cherished listeners. Your journey to intentional living begins with each small step, and we're honored to be a part of it. If you enjoyed what you heard today, please consider liking, subscribing, and rating our podcast on your favorite platform. Before we part ways, a friendly reminder, if you're embarking on a move or seeking expert guidance in downsizing, remember A Move Handled with Care in Denver. With over 15 years of experience in senior and specialty move management, we're here to transform your transition into a seamless, stress-free experience. Visit amovehandledwithcare.com for more information, and let's continue making space for the life you've always wanted. Until next time, stay inspired, stay intentional, and keep making space for what matters most.